Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of Beckman's Breakdown, the show where I take a look at all of the BWF World Tour events from Super 500 all the way up to Super 1000, including the majors and the team event. This week I'm going to be looking at the Hong Kong Open Super 500, the first tournament back after the recent World Championships. This episode is sure to be a special one, and it's not because it is the first tournament back after World Championships or anything like that. But actually, it marks the 1 year anniversary of this show, of Beckman's Breakdown, because my first episode last year was on the because my last episode last year was on the Hong Kong Open. So it's sure to be a special one. I mean, over the last year, lots of things have changed when it comes to the show. I've tried to play around with editing styles, how I deliver it, etc. If you remember back to the first episode, I actually scripted it and it feels a little bit robotic. And after I think 1 or 2 episodes, I decided just to kind of, do you know what? I'm just going to make notes and just go with the flow. I'm just going to chat shit to the camera, as I always say I do, and we'll see where it lands. And it seems that over the last year, a lot of you have really been appreciating that and enjoying the episodes. More people enjoying it than I actually thought, especially when considering I go on for a short episode would be like an hour and a half. So I really do appreciate all the support over the last year and all that kind of stuff. All the comments, I mean, amazing. We have so many good conversations in the comments section. There are some disagreements, but they're never condescending or rude. I mean, sometimes some people can get a little bit heated, but in general, people are just putting their opinions down. If people have a counter, they have a counter, or there's some people that come in with more context, more information, because obviously, you know, I'm not privy to every piece of information in the badminton world. If I knew all that's pretty much impossible. But there's a lot of you out there that might follow Japanese badminton really closely because you either live in Japan or you have a real interest in just that. You know, Chinese badminton, all sorts, every single federation. Some of you know a lot more than me. So whenever those kind of things come up, it's always good to see the comments where people kind of fill in the gaps or, or correct me or anything like that. It's absolutely fantastic. I think what we're doing here is creating a nice little community. I must admit, that's pretty cool to me. Honestly, I did these episodes originally because I wanted a way to get out more content to you, because obviously the polished edited videos do take a long time, and the more detail I want to go into those, the longer they take. So I wanted to have a way of being able to get content to you and you getting to know me as a person, which is a lot easier through these kind of videos. But in all honesty, I didn't know they would be as popular as they've become, and hopefully they can continue to get popular. But anyway, I'm kind of rambling on already. So yeah, no. I spoke briefly just then about how things have changed over the course of the year in terms of how I create these videos from, going to an unscripted version. I've played around with how many clips I use, background music, etc. And this episode is going to be slightly different as well. And one in particular, one big thing, and that is that, as always, I don't know, I can't remember when I started doing it, but I asked you guys on Instagram and on YouTube to give me your questions. And every single tournament, you always deliver with some absolutely brilliant ones. And this week is no exception. But what I noticed reading through the questions is that, and this is actually the first time this has happened, pretty much everything that I wanted to talk about had at least probably 2, if not 3 questions attached to it. So I thought, well, rather than me just talking about them and then I'd have no questions at the end, let's start this episode with the questions, because, like I said, the questions that you've given in were numerous and they kind of were asking questions about the kind of things that I wanted to talk about anyway. And it also, for me, a question would be a way to kind of focus my answer that little bit more. So that's what I'm going to do. If there's anything else I want to talk about that wasn't asked in a question, I'm not quite sure if there is. Maybe there's 1 or 2 things, then I'll put those at the end. But yeah, going to kick off this episode with the questions. But before I quickly get into them, as always, guys, as you can see, I'm wearing some Beckman's Breakdown merchandise. If you like what it looks like and you want to buy some, it would help support the channel, as well as the guy that created, that's behind the company that creates it, Matchy Clothing. He is a young badminton player from Holland, Matt Duell. So if you would like to buy some, you would be supporting me. You just you'd be supporting him, you'd be supporting the channel, and I must admit I do quite like the look of them. I know they're quite simple. Some people aren't a fan of simple designs, but I am. Maybe in the future we'll have some more funky designs coming out, but for now this is what we're going with. So yeah, go on to click the link in the description below. There's still 20% off. It was for the first 20 customers. I think we're getting close to actually having 20 first customers, which is absolutely amazing. So obviously that discount is only going to last for a little bit longer, so don't miss out on that. And free worldwide shipping, and that is something that will continue long after the discount. It's going to continue forever, as far as I'm aware. So again, if you want to buy any of this, link is in the description. So I'm going to crack on with these episodes and get into the questions, the fantastic questions that you guys sent in. So let's start with the first one. I know it's kind of late, but do you think Han Yue is being overshadowed because the other top women's singles players are usually the ones stopping her from acquiring a title? Not quite sure what you're asking here, but of course, you know, there's always going to be players that will ultimately be overshadowed by others. And I think obviously for someone like Han Yue, coming from China, a country that's got such a rich history of creating champions in all disciplines, not just women's singles, but obviously at the moment they've got, you know, 3, including Han Yue, fantastic players. But obviously for Han Yue, she is the 3rd player, because you've got Chen Yufei and you've got Wang Ziyi. So obviously, naturally, Han Yue is going to be overshadowed a little bit. It's a little bit like if you think only recently we had the retirement of Zhang Yiman, who was a really good player, but she was the 4th player, and she was really good, and she was able to kind of, I actually can't remember how many titles she won, but I can recall her being in at least a couple of finals on the World Tour level. She was a really good player, but she was completely overshadowed, and you know, ultimately that led to her retirement. So I think you're always going to have players that will be somewhat overshadowed. That doesn't take away from Han Yue. I think she's a fantastic player. I know that she's got a lot of fans. I know that CKU, a very famous guy on YouTube, and a guy I know relatively well personally, and I know that he absolutely adores her style, and you know, just the way that she plays the game. And I would agree. She's not my favourite player. Obviously, we all know who that is in the women's singles. But she's got this kind of, Han Yue's got this kind of like 90s, early 2000s kind of Chinese style with the big overturning of the body, the way that she moves, the way that she approaches a badminton. It's a little bit more old school, which I kind of do appreciate. It's quite nice to watch. But yeah, no, in answer to your kind of question, yeah, I think she, unless she can really push it up and kind of really stamp her mark, I think she will always be someone who's a bit overshadowed because she is number 3 in China. And that's absolutely ridiculous considering what she like ranked 4th in the world or 3rd in the world. So yeah, but that's just the difficulty. That's just the nature of the beast. Right, next question. Thoughts on the Shida Igarashi pairing? Okay, so I actually got some notes on this one. So for all of you who don't know, Chihara Shida and Arisa Igarashi, or formerly known as Arisa Higashino, some of you might know her better by that name, had their first tournament together at the Hong Kong Open because Matsuyama and Shida split up as a pair following the World Championships. In the Hong Kong Open, they reached the quarterfinals where they lost to their compatriots, actually, Ki Nakanishi and Rin Iwanaga. And what do I think of them? Well, I think they're very exciting for one. Very, very fast, which is what I expected because Matsuyama and Shida were a very quick, very attacking pair that had great rotational skills. And Arisa Igarashi was obviously a very fast player in the mixed doubles. Her and Yuta Watanabe could do some of those because, you know, Arisa is very capable from the back. She is one of those few players, or she's one of the few players that, well, actually probably one of the players that kick-started the jump smashing era for women's players. We're seeing a few others do it, but I think Arisa was, quote me if I'm wrong, probably one of the first ones to do it, especially in the doubles, or to do it really, really well. You know, she could consistently jump and really hit it hard, almost as hard as some of the men. But yeah, so Arisa and Shida, I think they're very exciting. When I watched them in their not their first match, but the first match I saw of them where they beat the newly reformed Indonesian pair, Rahayu and Ramadhanti, former world silver medalists. Obviously, Rahayu is a former Olympic champion. I was blown away by the speed. They won that match purely on just they blasted the Indonesians off the court. But I did a post of this on Instagram, and my question mark was going to be when they come up against a pair that can match them for speed. or maybe be able to counter their approach. And in the next round of the quarters, when we played Nakanishi and Iwanaga, we kind of saw that, because Iwanaga and Nakanishi aren't, as when you first see them, they don't look as fast, but they are incredibly quick and I would say very organized. They've played together for a long time. And I think that's where the big difference is. And that's what I think in terms of Shida and Igarashi, where they need to go and what needs to improve is just their communication, which is understandable because this is the first time they play together. I'm sure they've trained together, and they, when they meet up for the Japanese team training, I'm sure they've done some sessions together, or they've practiced together, or whatever. And obviously, they're training for this event. They would have done some time, got some court time, but obviously tournament play is different. And when they came up against a pair, the pair of Nakanishi and Iwanaga, who are able to kind of match them for speed, it was those little things that were just getting exposed. So there was a few times where I think, for me, when it comes to a doubles pair, communication is incredibly important, and also time together, because you kind of, over time, you get an understanding of what shots your partner can and can't do, and where they kind of move to in certain situations. And that's from an attacking position, from when you're in a good position, and when you're in a slightly bad position. When you're in kind of those 50-50 zones, or those very clear-cut areas, it's not as noticeable. And so you didn't really spot it in their match against Rahai and Rabadhanti, because they weren't, in all honesty, weren't pressured enough. I don't think the Indonesians were able to play at fast enough pace, but obviously that wasn't a case against their compatriots. And I started to spot a few things. I mean, like someone like Shida, she likes to kind of like charge forward and take what you could call risks. She's a little bit unorthodox in her technique, very, very fast, but she would always looking to charge forward, and sometimes at odd times. And you could see there were times where she would charge forward, and then Iwanaga and Nakanishi were able to counter that. They were kind of almost feeding in Shida to kind of come forward, and then they could like turn it over somewhere. And you can see Igarashi's not quite sure where to go. She's reacting that little bit slow to certain situations. And so obviously Iwanaga and Nakanishi were able to use that. That's what I'm saying about they're able to not only match the speed, but were able to kind of counter certain situations. They're the two things I had question marks about them in this pair for this tournament. And those were the things that kind of we got our answer in that match. But they're things that I think with more time together, more practice together, a better understanding together, and all that kind of stuff that comes with just playing longer and longer together, then we would start to see, I think, things turn around. So for me, it comes down to, I think I saw someone write a comment under a YouTube video, a highlight video, that actually made it quite a good point, which was that the players are playing like two individual players. So Igarashi and Shida were playing like two very good individuals. There wasn't that harmony between them yet. It's not like they couldn't link up. Obviously, you don't play that well. They obviously do understand each other, and I think they do get on very well. It seems to have a good relationship off the court. But on the court, it's just kind of those little things. Like Shida, like I said, Shida likes to take risks and really come forward and be very aggressive and up the court. So after more time, Igarashi's going to kind of understand when she's going to do that and will position herself a little better. She was just that little bit off, or reacting that little bit late. So like I said, good partnerships that mature over time. They have that great understanding of where each other on the court, what shots they can and can't do. And so you kind of feed off of each other. And that goes for when you're in the attacking situation. For example, if you're the front court player, you're always taught to be on the same side as your partner so that you can cover the straight. It makes perfect sense. But some partnerships or some players might have a really awesome cross-court attack. When you're first playing with that player, you might still be on the straight and they hit cross and then you're not quite covering it. But once you know that player, you're like, I have a feeling they're going to go for that cross-court. And you will actually shift the cross and then cover that one. And you will see good players, you almost see them kind of moving out of what you classically teach, because they kind of know instinctively what each other are going to do. And the same works in a kind of defensive situation. You kind of know, okay, in this situation, you've got that covered. But with a different partner, you might have to cover that one. So again, I think something like those situations, Igarashi and Shida just need more time together to kind of figure that out. And then once they become more of a unit, they play more as a team. Their individual skills are fantastic, and they showed that. But they need to kind of just create more of that kind of cohesive unit. But, in terms of what I see for them in the future, it's very, very exciting. Japan have got a number of pairs, and this is just a new one. And I don't think it's going to take long for Igarashi and Shida to kind of to kind of work that back into their game. What are your thoughts on China winning all 5 disciplines? My thoughts are that obviously this is the first time this has happened in the World Tour era, according to a BWF article that I read. And I think the last time it happened at a tournament at this level was the Denmark Open in 2014. And that was the Super Series era, so 11 years ago. And I think someone pointed out that quite a lot of the winners of the China, this was like their second draft team. There's, we didn't have no Shi Yuqi. Obviously Chen Yufei, although she isn't the top ranked one. But yeah, no, what was it? Their top mixed pair won, their top men's doubles pair won, and obviously, yeah, and women's doubles was won by obviously their second pair as well, although their top pair were in the tournament, the world champions. But yeah, what do I think? I don't really think too much of it. I think congratulations to Team China. Obviously, we all know they are the best team in the world, and they've proven it with this result. The fact they just have so much depth that even if, say for example, the women's doubles, their top pair loses, surprisingly, their second pair, Jai Fan and Zhang Shu Xian, can come in and are more than capable of winning the whole thing. So I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing for badminton, because if we look at just the World Championships that have gone, there was, I know China had a representative in every single discipline in that final, but obviously there was a good, for most of the time when you get to quarters or you get to the middle stages, there's still that diversity in badminton, there's still that thing. So I don't think this is kind of a sign that China are going to absolutely reassert their dominance and, be a kind of team that are going to win all 5 medals at, say, a Worlds or Olympics. They're obviously capable, but I don't think this is a sign that that's definitely going to happen. I think badminton's still got a very diverse, is diverse enough, very exciting. But yeah, obviously China are just the top team. As Malaysian's men's doubles discipline declined, there's only one pair that made it to the quarter-final. Well, my answer to that, I got another question similar to that, was actually that lumped Indonesia with that, saying, Indonesia and Malaysia did badly. Now, let's just focus on Malaysia. They didn't have, in the men's doubles discipline, obviously the World Championships was a bit of a letdown as well. They had no medalists when I had a few of them as my picks, and I thought that we'd have at least one medal. We could even see, I thought there was real potential that Malaysia could sweep the medals, that we could see them do what Korea did in 2014 in Denmark, where they had everyone on the podium, and we've seen other nations do that. So is this a decline? No, I think again, this has only been 2 tournaments. I know one of them has been the major tournament, but I think if you're asking these kind of questions, just know that badminton, like with everything, especially in a discipline like men's doubles where there's a lot of depth, is going to come in waves. It's very difficult. I think sometimes we see these questions being asked and these thoughts creeping into people's heads because we always think back to odd moments in history where we've had very dominant players. Especially if let's take men's doubles, for example, in the 2017 to 2020 era, or maybe 2018 more specifically, Indonesia had 6 pairs pushing the top 10, and obviously you had the top 2 pairs, you had the Minions and the Daddies, but then you had Alfie Nardianto, you had Rambitan and his partner, I can't quite think of his name right now, but you had so many pairs that were able to win big tournaments. They were all, I remember seeing an interview of Mohammed Hassan saying they were all champions. And so obviously they were winning a lot of tournaments, especially at 2019. I think Indonesian men's doubles pretty much cleared the way. And so I sometimes think that we kind of always, whenever a nation or a group of pairs, say like the Malaysian ones here, start to do quite well. They have been doing very well recently, with pairs like Aaron Charles, Soviet, Mantigo and Nur. They're all very highly ranked. They've all been performing well. And there's other pairs under the Malaysians as well. Under those 3 pairs, Malaysia have got a really strong men's doubles squad that you kind of look at it through the lens of that Indonesian team and say their 2019 season, which was absolutely insane. And so whenever there's this dip, people go, oh, they must be slipping. Why is this happening? But in general, if we take the Indonesian 2019 season out as a kind of anomaly, you will see this happen quite a lot. So I don't think Malaysian men's doubles has declined. Far from it. Yes, they've underperformed in the last 2 tournaments, but then if you go back to the tournaments before then, I wouldn't say overperformed, but they performed incredibly well. So for me, we're seeing this through, there's been a few players in this tournament actually, I'll get onto them, there's questions on them, but there's been a few that have been really struggling, but then made the final or won the tournament here in Hong Kong. So it goes to show that they're capable. They can always come back. They can always come back. It reminds me of this story, actually, when I was at the 2012 Thomas Cup. I remember being in the training hall, and I think Chris Adcock at the time may have been, again, the overall story has truth to the point I'm trying to make, but the details might be slightly off, so correct me if I'm wrong. I think he was having a bit of a hard time, but I think at the same time, maybe Fischer Nielsen or Joachim Fischer Nielsen and Christina Pedersen were having a difficult time as well. And I remember the coach, I think it might have been Pete Jeffries, or someone said to Chris, is like, do you think they're going to stay having a bad time forever? And his answer was no. No, they're that good. Yes, they're having a bad period, but they'll come back, or they'll be able to. They're capable of finding it back, and they were. And obviously that year, I think obviously Fischer won the bronze at the Olympics. So, and then I think went on to do some other great stuff. But the point I'm trying to make is that we'll see pairs and players go through these dips, ups and downs. But if they're truly world class, they will generally find a way back. And if they don't, there's usually something a little bit more serious going on behind the scenes. So, in answer to your question, has it declined? No, they're still absolutely amazing. Malaysia are absolutely stacked with men's doubles squads, men's doubles teams. They're probably still, for me, overall, the strongest men's doubles team in the world right now. I mean, Korea have a few really, you could probably name 3 or 4 pairs that Korea could have. And Indonesia, obviously, really strong. China still have plenty of teams. But overall, I still think the Malaysian squad are the strongest. They just had a bad couple of tournaments. But I have no doubt that even as I'm speaking this week at the China Masters, I could be sat here next week saying they're back, and I could be getting questions going, oh, Malaysian men's doubles has returned. That's just the nature of badminton. So yeah, moving on. Comment on Watanabe and his mixed doubles partner. Can they progress in the future? So at this tournament, it was really good to see Yuta Watanabe. Sorry, I didn't say his first name. There's another Watanabe on the tour, but Yuta Watanabe. The current 2-time Olympic bronze medalist. He's won multiple All England titles, been at World Finals in the mixed doubles. Absolutely fantastic. And he's also done some really fantastic things in the men's doubles as well. But for the last, 5 years, he has been solely focused on the mixed. He's had, since obviously Arisa Igarashi, who I spoke of earlier, has moved to women's doubles. Watanabe has decided to stick with mixed doubles. Obviously, he had a partnership with Maya Taguchi, but recently he's been playing with Masaki Matsutomo. And at the Hong Kong Open, they reached the semi-finals. A really good tournament. I can't quite remember. I did make a note to actually check this, and I didn't. So please, in the comments, let me know. When was the last time that Yuta Watanabe made the semi-finals of a tournament of this level? I don't think he hasn't done it since splitting from Arisa Igarashi. So it must have been pre-Paris Olympics. So it's been quite a while. So it's been over a year since we've seen him at this level of tournament. What do I think of him? Obviously, I'm not quite sure. I think the last time I spoke about him and Matsutomo, I can't remember if it was on one of these episodes or it was on my Instagram, but people were like, no, this is just a temporary partnership, as Maya Taguchi was suffering from an injury, and obviously Yuta wanted to continue playing, and Matsutomo, who was playing with Yuki Kaneko, who's now become a coach, obviously was looking for a partner. So I think they've kind of teamed up, and I'm pretty sure it's temporary. Although, having said that, I'm pretty sure I saw in the results today that Maya Taguchi was playing the China Masters in the women's doubles. So that means that obviously she's back, but I don't think, again, I haven't checked the mixed draw. I don't think Taguchi and Watanabe are in the draw. I don't think they actually would have probably made it into the draw. But anyway, I can't remember. I need to check if Matsutomo and Watanabe are playing together. If they are, then again, I'll ask everyone, is this going to be more of a permanent partnership, or will Watanabe move back to Taguchi? It's a difficult one in terms of their future, because the question mark is, does Watanabe, because of Taguchi, obviously she's very young, she must be only 19, 20 years old, I think. She's a bit older. She's very early 20s, absolute oldest. Whereas Matsutomo obviously is in her 30s. So they're on different ends of the spectrum. So if Watanabe's to play with Matsutomo, it would be just probably for this Olympic cycle. So it'd be more short term. But then does he go for Taguchi and help build her up? And potentially that could be slightly longer term. And Watanabe, his age wise, he's sitting in the middle somewhere of that. It all depends on what he wants. I don't quite know. I think, in all honesty, he's more likely to be successful with Matsutomo, and I'm not just saying that because of this Hong Kong Open result. I just think Taguchi, yeah, so she's good, but I'm not quite sure of her ability in mixed doubles. I think she's always been more of a women's doubles potential. I mean, that was obviously where she was more successful as a junior player, and I think she just seems more suited to that. And I know she hasn't played for long, so there's that pressure to play with. Obviously, Yuta Watanabe is probably the most successful doubles player for Japan. There's a lot of pressure for her to come in and play, and she hadn't played much on the World Tour, if at all. So there's a lot of pressure for her to handle. But after, say, a year, I didn't really see her grow throughout that period. Maybe it's going to take her longer. Maybe I'm being a little bit harsh. But I would have thought that if I saw Taguchi at the start as opposed to a year in of tournaments, or maybe she hasn't played that long. I don't know. It's difficult, but let's talk about Matsutomo and Watanabe. I've got some notes here. I think the difficulty for Yuta Watanabe, if we look aside from who's he actually going to play with, let's just, for argument's sake, say that he will play with Matsutomo. I think it is very difficult for Watanabe because I spoke about it when I talk about Igarashi and Shida and how linking up and being able to kind of be able to have that cohesive unit both in defensive and offensive situations. I think the same going for Watanabe here. I mean, Arisa Higashino, he played for so many years with her, and obviously they knew each other from the junior days. They're very similar in age, so they know each other off the court incredibly well. And now he's trying to play with either Taguchi, who's much younger, or Matsutomo, who's older. They don't quite have that same connection, and also the styles are completely different. Igarashi, like I spoke, is very strong from the back, very, very strong and able to, if she needs to come out, that she can do so. And so I think Watanabe, having played with Igarashi for so long, has got used to that. And now he's played with Matsutomo, who can obviously handle herself at the back. She is an Olympic champion in the women's doubles after all, and she has a very good defense and very good overall game. The way that she plays is a lot different. She's not as powerful. She's not as strong. She's not as fast. I think she might have a few more delicate touches and that kind of stuff. And obviously she has fantastic experience, which is her plus over Taguchi. But they're completely different players, Taguchi and Matsutomo, to Igarashi. And I think Watanabe is still trying to kind of adapt his way of playing. You can kind of see that. It's got better. I thought at this tournament, actually, I think Watanabe got him and Matsutomo got a few close wins over good pairs. Not fantastic pairs, but good pairs. For example, against, was it Hongwei? And his partner, I can't remember her name, I didn't make note of it, but the tall left-hander from Taipei, they're a very awkward pair. Gonzalez, is it? Yeah, that's the one, I think. They got a good win over them, and then you can see the confidence kind of rising. I think Watanabe's starting to find his feet, and that's sometimes what it takes. It takes 1 or 2 wins, and you can kind of get yourself kind of going. But again, overall, I think for Watanabe, he's still trying to adapt to playing with a completely different style of partner. And I think in doubles and level doubles events, that's a little easier to do. Mixed doubles is so much harder because the roles of the men and women are so different. And I think if you're not quite, there's more gaps that can be exposed and more holes on a court that can be found if you haven't quite got that. Whereas, say in men's doubles and women's doubles, you've got that equal strength between the two players. You can cover each other to a degree. I think in mixed doubles, if a gap or a communication error is a little bit weak, I do think that can be exposed that little bit more. Looking ahead, like I said, there's still the question mark of who is Yuta Watanabe going to play with. If any of you know, please do let me know. I think if I had to pick one, I think for him, I would go with Matsutomo because she is more experienced. She's played more mixed doubles. I think there's potential to do really well, as in if Watanabe wants to look at major medals, either trying to finally become a world champion in mixed, or even better his Olympic medal. I think he's got far more chance with Matsutomo than Taguchi. And I think the fact that we're getting towards the end of 2025, we're very soon going to be in 2026, and then only 2 years away. I know for someone like Taguchi, who's young, 2 years can be quite a lot. She could improve a lot, but I think by the time that she improves, I'm not quite sure. I wouldn't. Maybe Taguchi needs more experience in the mix with a slightly lesser partner that's still good. And then after LA, if Watanabe's still playing, and I think he could still play on, Matsutomo might retire at that stage. Then I think maybe it might be more of a viable option. I'm not quite sure. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that one, actually, because it's an interesting debate. Whether anyone knows who Watanabe's going to be partnered with. My last knowledge was that he was going to stick with Taguchi, but I'm now not sure. And who do you think Watanabe should partner with? But yeah, no, to summarize, I do think that it's going to come down to, again, a little bit like with Shida and Igarashi, finding that communication skills to be able to kind of work together. But I also think Watanabe is still in the process, and I think he is working it out of how to adapt the way that he plays to be able to play with a partner who's completely different to what he was used to. Next question. The future of Zhang Shu Xian for the next few tournaments, because Jai Fan will be back with Chen. She was really solid this week. I would absolutely agree with you right there. I thought Zhang Shu Xian, her and Jai Fan, won the Hong Kong Open. They played absolutely brilliantly. And I think Zhang Shu Xian has really stepped up this year. She's always been a really, really good player. Obviously, she had a good partnership with Zheng Yu. They were the third pair. They just missed out on qualification for the Paris Olympics. Now, Zhang Shu Xian, I believe, was always potentially stronger in the mixed doubles, but I don't think she was given enough time. I know she was partnered briefly with Zheng Siwei when him and Wang Chong were split up for that brief period, in 2022. But I thought that her skills, she's very quick with the racket, she's very quick moving forward, she's a really good front court player. I thought obviously those skills really make her suited to mixed doubles, but they've stuck with the women's doubles. But obviously her weakness has always been a little bit the back, not in terms of like skills, but probably more power. And I do think that sometimes that she lacks angle. I think she could have developed that a bit more. A lot of her smashes were quite flat. But I'd say over the course of this year and having watched her, two things have happened. One is Zhang Shuxian's got a lot stronger. It might have been something her rear court play with her back. I know she's always had that support. She usually, for a period, she wore it over the top of her shirt, but now it's under. She's still wearing it. I can still see it. So maybe she has issues with her back. And obviously, if you've got lower back issues, the rotational stuff that requires to generate a lot of power, she might have struggled. Obviously, she's quite a slight player and a small player as well. But I do think she's improved her rear court play, which gives her and Jai Fan more options. If she's forced to the back, she can still either work her way to the front or can set Jai Fan up at the back, at the front of the court. I do think that's massively improved. I also think, and this kind of leads on to what's actually happening with this pair, is that I think they're slowly starting to work out. Again, I spoke about it with Watanabe in the mix, but also with Shida and Igarashi in the women's doubles. I think Jai Fan and Zhang Shu Xian are finally at their stage where they're kind of working out what works for them. They're kind of being able to find those situations. It's not always as clear cut as being able to attack and engage the front court player. It's all the little things, all the subtle things, the little defensive situations, knowing which shot both of them are going to go for in this situation, where most of them what attacks they like to do, what they don't like to do, and how you kind of move and approach the game that way. How do you link up both in the attack, but also how do you help each other in the defensive situations? And also in the 50-50s, kind of what shots do each player like to do more often that maybe they can react off and kind of shift into good positions. All that stuff, like I said, takes time. And I do think Zhang Shuxian and Jai Fan, it's not just this tournament because they won. I think we've seen it over the last few tournaments, but are starting to figure that out. And that's why it's quite surprising, I guess, that I think from this week in China that Zhang Shuxian is going to have a new partner. I'm not quite sure who it is, but Jai Fan's going to be repartnered with Chen, the player that she won all those world titles with, obviously won the Paris Olympics with. So just as Zhang and Zhang were finding their feet, Zhang Shan's on all this development as a pair, and now they're going to repartner it with Chen. I think most people might react to this initially and go, that's really good. Chen and Jai Fan were such a great pair, 4-time world champions, Olympic champions, Asian Games champions. They've won absolutely everything in the world of badminton. But I kind of see it as why. I'm still quite confused as to why. I see some posts going. I think I saw one. I think it was from a Malaysian newspaper saying they've done it to make life harder for Pearly Tan and Tina Lithuanian. I don't quite see it that way. I'm not quite sure whether it's because, let's be honest, Jai Fan and Zhang Shu Xian can beat Pearly and Tina. They didn't need to split them up. They were doing so well. And another reason why I'm a little bit confused and asking why is that since Paris, Chen Chen has had a few different partners, but hasn't really set the world alight. I know she hasn't been given the kind of level of partner that Jai Fan has, but I don't see that desire from Chen Chen. Unless something has changed recently and she's like come to the coach and saying, look, I've taken some time away. Well, you've given me a few partners and I wasn't feeling it, but now I'm really motivated and I want to come back. And the only player I want to play with is Jai Fan. And maybe the Chinese coaches have kind of agreed to that. And obviously Jai Fan would have to agree to that. Maybe that's going on, but I would question Chen Chen's level and desire. But maybe that, like I said, maybe that second one, her desire, has changed. I mean, we have seen Jia and Chen come back together, I think, in team events. And again, it wasn't absolutely that mind-blowing. It didn't leave much of an impression. So again, I am a little bit left as to why this is happening. I guess we'll have to see how they do in their first few tournaments. It's not like they're going to suddenly reignite the magic. They are capable of that, but it's not like if they did really poorly in these two upcoming tournaments that I would completely rule them out. But I'll be interested to see kind of the desire from those pairs and how they can move forward. Again, at the moment I am confused a little bit as to why this is happening. Again, like I said, if anyone knows some insider information, then please do let me know. But I do feel a little bit sorry for Zhang Shu Xian because she's really developed as a player. Her and Jia have started to kind of really get this good connection going. They're kind of really starting to find their feet like consistently, and now the partnership is over. Whether or not this is temporary with Chen Chen, I don't know. It would make sense that it wouldn't be, but yeah, no, I really don't know. But if anyone has any further information, then let me know. I do feel, like I said, a little bit sorry for Zhang Shu Xian on that front. Next one, Liang Keng and Wang Chan's return. Obviously, I had a few questions about Liang Keng and Wang Chang because they won the Hong Kong Open, and I think it's their first final or title, I think, since the Olympics, where they did reach the final. And every single Beckman's breakdown since those Paris Olympics has pretty much been what has happened, especially this year. Maybe they reached a final not long after. They might have done, but this year in 2025, they've had a bit of a bad time. Been really, really struggling. They're constantly talking about post-Olympic blues, even though, over a year has passed. But obviously now they finally win a tournament. People are asking, is it the return of them? Now, in regards to Wang Chang and Liang Keng, I've always been under the impression, I've already spoken about, how pairs that are really, really good are always capable of coming back and reigniting. And a pair like Liang Keng and Wang Chang have always been, they're an Olympic finalist, Olympic silver medalist. They always had that capability. That's not to say that, that means it's a guarantee they'll come back. But I did think, having watched them over, especially the last couple of months from when, just before the World Championships, I really criticised them because it looked like there was no real game plan, no real desire. It looked like they were just hitting shuttles over the net. So gradually, each tournament I saw them, it's not like they were obviously doing really, really well, but just the performances, not the results, were definitely showing that things were turning around for them. Even at the World Championships, they lost through, obviously, in the third round, but they lost to a really good pair, a really well-playing pair, Rankireddy Shetty, actually the pair that they beat this Hong Kong Open. So I'm not surprised that a result like this has come. I thought it was only a matter of time. I also feel the same about Hoki and Kobayashi. I think it's only a matter of time before we see them do really well, reach a final, if not win another tournament. Their level is also on that slight trajectory upwards. So in regards to this tournament, I think the player that's been more weaker, again, overall, he's the one that gets more of the kind of negative comments, I think, is Liang Keng. He's the one that I think when the pressure's high, if we look back at some of the major tournaments, he's been the one that's been the weak link or the one that can crack under the pressure. Wang Chan's a kind of an aloof player. He's definitely someone that can go through periods of playing some wild mistakes, but I think that's his style, whereas it never looks like he's kind of really cracking under the pressure. I think it's more Liang Kang. And I actually felt that at this tournament, Liang Kang was really, really good, really, really solid. He looks like recently he has lost quite a lot of weight. He looks a lot fitter, and I think that's definitely helped. I think he kind of put on a little bit of weight for a period that might have been kind of going against him. He looked really fit, really strong. And I thought one thing, especially in the final, was right at the end of the second game. I think it was 19 all. He hit a backhand drive out, and then he got flicked and he left it, and it was in. So they lost the game basically off of him. And I actually was watching that live, and I made a note going, is this the start of Liang Kang starting to crack again under the pressure? But then in the second and third game, Wang Chan was brilliant, but I thought Liang Kang was a really deciding factor. He was hitting some fantastic smashes from the back of the court. His front court was good. His mid court area was really good. Overall, very, very solid. And whenever he made like what could be deemed an easy mistake, the next point he was always solid again. He kind of corrects himself. He never let it kind of spill over into points. So I thought that showed actually something really, really good. Maybe a slight improvement in the psychological game. That would have to be seen in more tournaments when those situations arise more and more. But in this particular tournament in Hong Kong, I thought he was absolutely brilliant, and I think that gave Wang Chang more confidence. We started to see him kind of come out of shell. He didn't feel he had to. Sometimes we've seen Wang Chang go through periods of mistakes because it feels like he's almost trying to make up for Liang Kang feeling pressure or not playing brilliantly or making more mistakes by trying to get more involved, and that's always going to lead to, in general, you're going to make more mistakes that way. We kind of saw that a little bit maybe from Shetty in this final. Jill Clark mentioned it, that he was almost trying to get involved too much at the front, and I think he started to miss some of those. And then there was a few times where it went through. Maybe he started to leave them, and Rankireddy actually was making some poor mistakes from those situations. Maybe it kind of like fell over. But that's the kind of thing that we saw in the Chinese pair, Wang Chang almost trying to make up for those kind of areas. But at this tournament, I think because Liang Kang was a little bit more solid and doing his job in the partnership, being basic, hitting some fantastic, powerful smashes, I think it helped Wang Chang. And then obviously overall, they are a brilliant pair and they were playing really, really good badminton. I think the key things in the final and overall was that I think they were able to get on the attack that little bit more than the Indians. I got some notes here actually. Men's doubles final, where is it? Here we go, Wang Chen. Yeah, no, so I thought actually, getting on the attack obviously is key. I think the Hall played very, very quickly. I'm not sure if that's just the TV angle, but it looked incredibly fast and definitely seemed to suit players that had that extra firepower. And obviously the Chinese were able to get on the attack that little bit more. I think also when it came to, say, 50-50 areas, so like say the game, say in a rally, both sides are quite equal. So like one pair might have the slight advantage, but not enough that it's kind of really noticeable. It's not like if a pair is really on the attack or smashing from short, you could say that's like 90-10 or 80-20. So when the rally is closer to 50-50, I think the Chinese were more solid, made less errors in that situation. They were also able to get the advantage onto their side a little bit more often. I think also, and they were one of the things they were able to do that a little bit better was when they played fast, they were then able to play the big court. When they're going over, taking the brave shot to go over the Indians or to lay it off in front, they just varied that pace that little bit more. So they were able to get onto the attack that little bit more. Like I said, I think when it came to the more of both pairs, the front court player, Wang Chang, was able to get involved and kind of deliver winning points far more often, whereas Shetty maybe was actually trying to get involved too much and would make a few errors, and that kind of spilled over to Rankireddy, etc., etc. I think in the third game, the Chinese, all the key battles, like I said, the mid-court area, the service situation, all those things, the Chinese were just winning them a little bit more often, and I think also the Indians made a number of errors, were snatching at shots, and they just didn't look, in that third game, didn't look particularly comfortable. I know the score was like 17, but I think the Chinese, when they got within 2 points, they got a little bit nervous. They realised, we haven't won a title in so long. I think they got a little bit tight, but they'd got such a big lead that I think they were obviously able to close it out. But yeah, it was really good. Obviously, Wang and Liang is at their return. This result's going to really help them. It'd be nice to see how they back it up this week at the China Masters, and I'm not sure if they're playing the Korea Open actually. But it also was a good result, obviously, this fight, talking of this final, for Rankireddy and Shetty, because they've been in 6 previous, when they've reached the semi-finals at their last 6 tournaments, the 6 previous times they've reached the semis, they always fell with a hurdle, with the last one obviously being at the World Championships. So to finally get over that hurdle and get into a final, obviously that's quite a breakthrough for them, especially, consider they've had a bit of a difficult year with injuries, family bereavements, illnesses, all that kind of stuff. So really good to see them back in a final. Obviously, just in that final, they weren't quite able to deliver the same level that they were able to early in the tournament. But I think a big part of that was that the Chinese were just really, really strong. And like I said, won the key areas, the key battles that we see in the doubles: getting the attack, the service situation, winning the flat game, and being able to kind of play with a variety of pace, like layer off, go over the top, not just hitting hard and going through and that kind of stuff. I think the Chinese were just that little better in all those situations, and being a bit better in all those situations obviously adds up. So yeah, moving on. Your opinion on Lakshya Sen's performance and what he improved in this tournament, because like I said earlier that there's been a number of players that have had difficult periods. I've just mentioned 2, Rankireddy and Shetty, although I probably wouldn't say they've had a bad period. 6 semis is still pretty good, but obviously struggling to get over the hurdle. Obviously, Wang and Liang are definitely a pair that have been really struggling since the Olympics, and they've obviously had a great tournament here. Lakshya Sen's in a similar boat. He's had a really tough year. I think his best result this year at a tournament of 500 and above, so what would deem a Beckman's breakdown, I think this is his best result, reaching the final. I don't think he's reached a final of a super... I think his last final was a Super 300 last year, so he hasn't reached or got close. I think his best result this year was the All England quarterfinal, the Super 1000 earlier in the year. But other than that, it's been first and second round losses for Lakshya. So he has really been struggling, obviously, to reach the final. I thought this week, throughout this whole tournament, he played really, really well. He looked a little bit stronger. He looked to be a little bit more attacking, a little bit faster on his feet, if I'm more honestly. And it looked like he was back to playing with a bit more purpose. I don't know what it was, whether purpose can kind of bleed into confidence, which, obviously he was gaining that as he was playing, getting deeper into the tournament. But when I've watched Lakshya, when at the World Championships, I know he had a tough first round against Xiu Qi. It's also a first round, which is always awkward. But I sometimes, I don't know, I just felt like he was playing through the motions. He didn't look as fit, as fast, as sharp as we all know that he's capable of. The kind of Lakshya that we've seen reach an All England final, help India win a Thomas Cup, get a medal at the Worlds, or even his run to 4th place at the Olympics, which was, he played absolutely brilliantly at that Olympic Games, but we haven't seen that for a while. So I think at this tournament, it's hard to know what's changed, because it's from the Worlds to this, it's not very long. Maybe it's the training and the build-up is finally paying off. Maybe he just peaked a little bit late. Who knows? But I just felt that all the little things that that Lakshya's good at, his foot speed, his ability to kind of retrieve the shuttle, he has got a good attack when he wants to. He's usually very good at doing subtle angle changes, because he's got that kind of quite a natural flowing style. It's kind of a little bit more, I don't know, I always explain it as in, like, you watch like a Chinese player, it's kind of like very, very taut and in place. But then you watch a player like Lakshya, it's a bit more, that looks, I don't know, it's more natural looking. But those kind of players, like a Kun Levert and Lakshya Sen, and if we go back to, say, like Taufik Hidayat back in the day, and all those kind of players, because they're a little bit more free, they can hit these kind of like lots of variety of angles from absolutely nowhere. And I always think that Lakshya Sen's been very good at that. He can kind of just like suddenly just change his grip, not grip, but the angle of his racket subtly. So if we say take a round the head cross court, he can very quickly do it quite deep, quite tight, quite even tighter, but he can do that from almost every angle. But I haven't seen much of that from him when it comes to his second game. It's always been a little bit basic, but I saw a little bit more of that at this tournament. I think he played the front court much better. Again, it's just lots of little things. Is there anything in particular? I think he just looked more confident. He was playing with more purpose, and he looked faster. And he was able to maintain that throughout the entirety of the game. So yeah, no. What was the question? Well, yeah, what he improved on, and what I think was his opinion. I thought it was a great performance. Even the final, even though he lost relatively comfortably scorelines against Li Shifeng, I thought that actually the game itself was pretty good. He just had, I think, 2 moments where he just let Li Shifeng take control and get a big lead, and then it was difficult for him to come back. But I think actually overall the match was pretty good. The scorelines, if you just went on the scorelines, just like, it's pretty straightforward, but it was actually entertaining and good game, and I thought Lakshya still played well then, but did really well. Obviously his semi-final against Chen was able to kind of come back a little bit in that second game. It looked like he was going to go to 3. That was a fantastic performance. His quarterfinal over his younger compatriot Ayush Shetty, that's quite a pressured match, so that kind of shows good. Yeah, his performance overall was very strong. Differences, like I said, I think he was just a little bit fitter, a little bit stronger, a little bit faster looking, and for me, just looked like he had a little bit more of a game plan to what he was doing. I can't really pinpoint exactly his tactics, because obviously that's always going to change depending on different style of opponents, but it just looked like he was playing with that little bit more purpose. My thoughts on Lakshya Sen and Popov. So Lakshya Sen and Popov played in the quarterfinals. I had a few people messaging me actually about that match because of their third game, which ended 29-27 in the third. Overall, that match was absolutely brilliant. It was really entertaining to watch. The intensity, I know the second game, was it like 21-9 or 21-8 to Lakshya Sen, but the first game, and especially the third, that was just, the intensity was just really high. Both players were attacking. I think overall the hall in Hong Kong does invite more of an attacking style. More of it, you can't sit back and defend. So players did have to go for it that little bit more. And we really saw that come to the forefront in that third game. And I'm not saying the third game was the best because it was 29-27. It was actually the rallies involved were just really good. Especially, I think, as the game really got to the end, there was a couple of fantastic attacking points, but then Lakshya Sen just saving at the last minute. There was lots of drama. It was kind of like, when you watched it, there was the kind of game that got your heart racing. It didn't matter who you were supporting, or even if you're neutral, you just couldn't help but start sweating a little heart rate, because you just know, like, the intensity of that game was absolutely fantastic. I would say though that I think on the first few chances that Lakshya Sen had to potentially win that match, he did sit back a bit. I would have liked to have seen him go for it a bit more. He did try, I think, a little bit later, or obviously when he was like match point down. But I just think there was a few points where he could have gone for it when he played it a little bit too safe. Whereas I think Christo was a little bit more willing to take it on, and maybe that was the decisive thing. But when it's 29-27, really it comes down to a little bit of luck, and it can be anyone's game at that stage. But yeah, no, it was absolutely brilliant. I love the relentless attacking game. I love attacking badminton. Especially in men's singles. I do appreciate a good, long, hard-fought match and some defensive skills and long, grueling rallies. I think that's a different kind of battle. But in terms of pure entertainment, when two players are really playing very fast, very attacking, and just not letting up, that is absolutely amazing to watch. And that third game, the whole match, but especially the third game, had all that. And I really have to appreciate the fact they were able to maintain that intensity pretty much from start to finish, bar the second game where I think the game got away from Christo. But overall, that game was absolutely fantastic. So yeah, I actually will say, while I'm just loading up my next question, that Christo is really having a good period at the moment, isn't he? I think the fact that he's getting to that point where his physical side, he's obviously smoothed out his footwork. He's a little bit more efficient, a little bit more fluid. He's not so bouncy. I've spoken about this in the past. But I think he's finally finding his feet. It can take a few years. He's obviously had great results and had some odd results on the way, but I think he's starting to reach that point now where he's going to be consistently... He's a player that you could look at should be consistently making the quarterfinal stages of all tournaments that he plays in. He is becoming that kind of player, and I think he showed it throughout this tournament, actually. He had some tricky opposition. Obviously, he had Ginting first round. That's no easy feat. And even the Malaysian guy, I can't remember his name, Adil, I think. He's an awkward player because he's really, really good. A little bit, again, like plays a little like he doesn't care, but he definitely does. And an awkward one, and it could be potentially a bit of a banana skin for a player like Christo, who's just kind of getting into the seeded positions and will feel the pressure of those must-wins. But Christo's handling those matches very, very well, and that for me is a real sign of him finding some maturity on the world tour. Next question, sticking in singles: can Lee Zijia, Ginting, and Axelsen come back after their injury problems? He then said, I know Ginting can, but can the others? Maybe he's asked that extra bit because I have put on Instagram, and I've mentioned before that I do think Ginting can come back, or whether that's just his opinion, or maybe the guy asking it is most likely Indonesian. But do I think they can come back? Yes, I've already said this a few times throughout this video. Any player that's played at the level that all three of those have played at are more than capable of coming back. I think they're all three of them are in different situations. I've spoken about Ginting. He's had the most time back, and I do think he's, every tournament I watch him, he still has yet to get a win on his comeback trail, but he has had, other than, you could argue, Brian Yang at the China Open, which probably maybe you could see that was his best chance to win one. He's had really hard opposition. He's had Naraoka. He had Popov Jr. at the Worlds, and obviously Christo here. And obviously Brian Yang is also another fantastic player. So there are no easy matches in men's singles, but he has yet to find a win yet for Ginting. But I think what he's shown, and he's continued to show this week in Hong Kong, is that he is finding his game. And people have had said that why I think Ginting might struggle to come back is because obviously he's getting older. He's like 28, 29, and his main attribute, you could say, was his speed. And obviously as you get closer to 30, that starts to drop. And whilst that is true, Ginting has far more to his game than speed. I think he has really good, well, he's not, I know he's been, I think a few other people, even I think there's a channel on YouTube that said that his shot quality is something that's not high. I would somewhat disagree with that. He does make errors, granted, but when he's playing well, and I think he's capable of this, his shot quality, especially from the front, his sharp skills are really, really good. And I think if he can, what's just held him back a little bit when it comes to that is that he's just making a few too many errors. Maybe he's still trying to refine his feet. I think if he can, he's obviously not going to go to 0 errors, but if he can get them where he's making obviously a little bit less, that's going to apply. That has a snowball effect. Not only are you not giving away more points to your opponent, but you apply more pressure because your opponent feels like, okay, at the moment they can be like, okay, Ginting beat me on this deception at the net, but he's going to probably make, in return, I'm going to get maybe 2 errors back. So you're not actually in a deficit. If he can switch that so he can hit 2 winners or just 2 shots that are just put massive pressure on your opponent, but you're only getting 1 error for every 2 or 3 that he does, you know you can't last the match, that you can't sit back. It puts more pressure and it snowballs, and then that bleeds into other areas of the game. And I do think Ginting's shot quality has actually been pretty high, and it's only getting better. And I also think for him, what might help is the fact that you've got young players beneath him that are starting to do really well, as most notably Awi Farhan, who had another fantastic tournament in Hong Kong, and you've got Ubaidullah. Please tell me I'm remembering that name right. The guy, the boy that won the Asian Junior Championships this year, a really fantastic player. So they've got those 2 players snapping at his heels. And I think Ginting does look motivated when he's playing. He's fist pumping, and I'm sure he's training really, really hard. So maybe if he's got that desire and want to come back, I think with those young players that are snapping at his heels, wanting to take his top spot, or wanting, not his top spot because Christie's top, but like his top spot within PBSI because Christie is left. I think that's going to help him, and it just gives him that extra motivation. And if he can keep speed with someone like Farhan, who's slowly becoming, he's incredibly fast and obviously young, I think Ginting's going to be able to keep enough. His speed might drop a bit compared to him when he was 21, but not by that much. And I think now he's gaining a little bit more experience. Maybe he can use some of that to kind of adapt his style. But I do think he can come back. For Viktor, I think obviously he's shown in the past that he can have an injury, or he can go take time away for surgery and come back stronger. He did it with his ankle. He came back even stronger after that. Obviously, this is a back surgery, probably a little bit harder to recover from, and that's probably why he wasn't able to deliver a fantastic level in Hong Kong. I know it was a level that he was a little bit upset about, but I did hear that also that the week before he had a fever, so his preparation for the event wasn't great. He didn't play particularly brilliantly. He had odd moments where we saw some great stuff, but he didn't look comfortable. You know, he was lifting as a lot of times, and I saw this with Lee Zijia as well, but I'll get to him, where you'd come to lift and he just was kind of like snatching at it and he was bobbling it was going like wide and short and just didn't look comfortable. You know, when your players played a lot of tournaments, they feel comfortable from the front of the court where they're playing tight nets, or being able to lift it and push it into the corners. If that accuracy is lacking a little bit, you can usually, it's a bit of tension in the arm, and that usually comes from the fact that they haven't played much or are lacking confidence, and obviously that is probably the case with Viktor. But obviously he played Naraoka, who played very, very fast and was able to play big court and really push and pull and move Viktor all over the court. So it was going to be a difficult, with the way that Naraoka was playing, difficult for Viktor. But Viktor's probably the most professional player out there. You know that he's doing everything in his power to come back. Obviously, you know, the achievements that he's had, regardless of the fact that he's pushing into he's now into his 30s, I think he has the skills, he has the ability, he has the professionalism to be able to modify his game, and to obviously knows what it takes to come back from an injury or coming back from surgery like this. So yeah, his first tournament back wasn't good, but again, Viktor has proven in the past that he can come back from setbacks or injuries and come back even stronger. And I think Viktor still has one more card to play up his sleeve when it comes to his career. So I think for Viktor, we're going to, you know, I'd be surprised if we don't see him playing well again in the future. So for Lee Zijia, I think for me it's difficult to read because obviously he keeps himself to himself, understandably. You know, he seems like quite a reserved guy, you know, quite a private person. And understandable, I think, you know, everything he says and does is usually reported on in the media, whether that's positive or negative and all that kind of stuff. So it's hard to get a read. Obviously, he's only had his second tournament back. And I think what I said of him from Following the World, where he looked a little bit slow, his defense looked a little bit susceptible. I think those things were still there at the Hong Kong Open. But can he come back? Yeah, of course he can. You know, he's an absolutely amazing player. For me, I think with him, it's going to take the longest. I think it might take the longest to refine his form. Because I think for him, it's going to be more mental than anything. I think he is physically over his injuries. But I think psychologically, that's not just like psychologically, I was injured before. It's just more, I think his personality, I think finding what works for him. I still think he's figuring out his independent stuff. I still do think he's trying to kind of really get a good grasp of what works for him. And obviously when you have a knockback, like an injury, like that just adds another spanner into the works. But I think with just the situation he's in, and everything surrounding him, and I think, like I said, I don't know him. I don't know Ginting or Viktor personally either. But just based on an outsider, I think the situation he's in, I think it might take a little bit longer. We've seen it in the past where he's gone through periods of playing not great, whether it's a physical or a psychological issue that he's going through, but he needs just that more time to work through it himself, to figure out what he needs. So I think for Lee Zijia, he's someone that takes that little bit longer to get over these kind of things and figure things out. I mean, he might be able to do it quickly. He's obviously more than capable, but I wouldn't be surprised if it takes, out of those three players, it takes him the longest. But I would still hold a lot of hope and confidence that we will see a very well-playing Lee Zijia in the future. Whether that happened in 2025, we'll have to wait and see. But I think it's going to maybe take him a little bit longer than the other two. Okay, so those are all the questions that I've been given, or I picked most of them that I was asked. Is there anything here I've spoken about? I guess the only thing that I want to add, following on from that last one, is I actually got a few questions about it. I was going to talk about it when I was about Lakshya Sen. And that is, obviously, we're talking about, I've mentioned them sporadically throughout this video. We're starting to see, obviously, the next generation. So, obviously, whenever there's been an Olympic Games, like there was last year, usually for within a year after, we start to see the next generation, the 19 to 21, 22-year-olds really started to make their mark. After Tokyo, we did see it slightly before, but after Tokyo, we saw Yukunovitz, Li Shifang, Lakshya Sen, all those, Kodai, those kind of the four main ones, the players that were like winning the major junior titles, starting to really make their name known. And now, following Paris, we've had your Alex Lanier, Ari Farhan, even Huza An to an extent. And now we're starting to see a few others on top of that. Obviously, at the Worlds, we had Victor Lai. He's only 20. He lost in the qualifying, actually, in this tournament. But I wouldn't look into that too much. He's obviously, the Worlds is such an anomaly result that I don't think we should put the expectation that we're going to see him getting through to the main draws and getting to the last stages of all his tournaments now. And let's give the kids a little bit of, the men's singles is tough. You can't go from that high and then back it up. But obviously another one who did do well, Hong Kong Open, and this is the last player I would talk about, is Ayush Shetty, the tall player from India, a real talent. He's also 20 years old. And had a really good tournament. Who did he beat on the way through? He beat Naraoka, that was it. So I can't remember who he beat in his first round, but then he beat Naraoka, who obviously was the player that put out Victor Axelsen. And now for me, with Ayush Shetty, he's very tall. He must be the same height, if not a bit taller than Victor Axelsen. He must be 6'3" minimum. So I think in terms of development for Ayush Shetty, obviously he's very powerful, very tall, great attack, very powerful, has very nice control actually moves really, really well for a tall player. He looks quite put together. But obviously the general things that come with being that tall, the trade-offs, the things you need to work on, the things that Victor himself has made known countless times before. You need to be able to work on your agility, your mobility, your defensive skills. Those are things that are very difficult for a tall player. And those are the things that I do think that Shetty can continue to improve on, because they just add that. If we use Victor as a good kind of comparison, when Victor got his defensive game up massively, that was one of the things when he was at his absolute peak around the Tokyo Olympics and the year or two after. Most people point to his attack, which was absolutely phenomenal. But what really a lot of players, if you actually ask professionals that played him, it's his defense that was so good. And then that made his attack even more dangerous, because you're like, okay, well, Victor's got a great attack, so let's just attack him. Let's not let him attack. We'll take that away from him. But then his defense is so solid that all's going to happen, you're going to get tired, you can't get through him, you don't get any cheap points. So then you have to lift it, and then you're faced with his attack again. So I think for Shetty, obviously he's going to be in a situation where he needs to do the same thing. It's not like he's got a poor defense. He actually moves, like I said, very well for a tall player, but obviously needs to continue to get stronger. And I haven't watched his recent interview on the Average Not Average podcast with Victor Axelsen and CKU, but I did see one very short clip where he said to be at the top level, you need to be at your absolute best every single day. You need to be in top shape in every single match. And he said, and that's really difficult to do. So obviously he knows that he needs to work on that to be able to perform at his best. But no, he is a real talent, very, very attacking. And I actually think, mentioning Victor, I know that he was over in Dubai training with him. So I think if he can do more of that, obviously learning from a player that is the same build, same height, that kind of, he probably hopefully has learned how the level of professionalism required just to be a top player in general, but the kind of things that he needs to do as a player of his build. And I really hope, and I'm sure he did, that he was questioning and asking so many questions of Victor. What should I do for this? With the same height, what can I do? Other than don't forget your shoes for a training session. But, kind of things like, what kind of exercises do you do? What kind of this? Basically asking someone who's been there and done that, but has those similar characteristics, similar things that he needs to work on. I really hope that he did do that. And we'll keep going back to Dubai and keep asking Victor questions and trying to learn as much as possible from him. Because if he can, develop his defense, develop his overall game, but just make himself limit his vulnerabilities and weaknesses, then he's going to be a really real good handful, and a player that, a player that can obviously, I'm not going to sit here and say he's the future of Indian badminton, because Lakshya Sen's still only in his early 20s, pushing his mid-20s. He's still got a number of good years left in him, and he proved this week that he's still got plenty of game left. But obviously I've heard recently, I think Pranoy is coming close to his retirement. They only have a year or two left. So obviously it is good for India that they've got another singles player. One of their best players is, that's been around for a long time, is on their way out. They've got a new player to come in, and they've got a few others floating around, but obviously they haven't been able to kind of make their kind of like mark on the game, mark on the world tour as much as Ayush Shetty has. So yeah, no, that was the last thing I actually want to talk about, was talking about Ayush Shetty. If I didn't mention him, I'm sure the Indian people who I know watch a lot of my videos would definitely be calling me out on that. So yeah, also, actually, no, sorry, I made a note here. It's in my bold writing. Ayush Shetty was able to do one thing that Viktor couldn't do, actually, and that was have a successful racket swap. So what I mean by a successful racket swap is actually swap his racket in a singles game and then win the point. Viktor has twice, as far as I know, been able to switch his rackets, but then he's always gone on to lose the point. Ayush Shetty in his first round against Liang, actually, that's who he played from Taipei, another good player, so that's another good result. He was actually able to do a racket swap and win the point. So that's quite an impressive thing to do anyway. But yeah, that's just a bit of a fun thing to end with. So yeah, no, that's all the questions and kind of everything that I wanted to talk about. So again, that is the end of the video. Hour and 22 minutes have been talking. This is a short one, guys. So thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. I've got a few things. What's coming up next for me? A few things. I've got a big announcement soon that I have to keep close to my chest right now, but it will become, I will make everyone on here know very, very shortly. I'll be doing a video on it, actually. But where that news might be dropped is most likely going to be on Instagram, and I think it's going to be announced within the next week or so. But it is huge, actually. I'm really excited about it. In terms of my YouTube channel, obviously, we've got 3 tournaments back to back. So there's going to be 3 Beckman's Breakdown episodes. The third one in Korea, there might be a slight delay because of the announcement coming up. It might be difficult for me to get the episode out quickly, but I'm going to do my very best. And in terms of my other stuff, I have filmed my next Behind the Badminton episode. It's on the 2017 women's singles final. I'm really happy with the script that I've written. I filmed it, I just obviously need to edit it. But that might have to be pushed back a bit because, like I said, with the announcement and everything that's linked to what that'll be about, it will all become clear when I actually announce it. There's a lot of work to go around behind it, so I need to focus more of my time on that. And obviously with these tournaments going on, my spare time is quite limited. But following on, actually, I recently put out a community post because the first episode of that got a copyright strike. I had a few copyright strikes with it. This was on the 97 World Final, men's singles final. And I managed to get around them, all the copyright strikes and everything. And then new ones came up and the video got blocked, so you can't actually see it. So I will also be trying to resolve those issues and have that video back out to you. But what the community post was about was that I mentioned this already, but it kind of like other things got in the way and I kind of put it on the back burner, but a Patreon account. I have been considering it for a while, and now with this recent block and copyright issues within the BRF are very difficult. For one or other reason, they're just one of those companies that if they can spot your stuff, they're quite strict on it. It's hard to work around it. And obviously I'm putting a lot of effort into these videos, and if it's blocked, you can't see it, but if it's copyright strike, you can still see it. Usually then obviously it gets demonetized or the money goes towards the BRF. So obviously I get nothing for that. So I think a workaround for me would be to create a Patreon account where obviously if you become a patron, you can have access to these videos. Obviously those videos will then be able to have far more, another thing you always get copyright strike on is anything to do with the Olympic Games. So there's been videos of mine that are still up, but I don't earn money from them. So like Kento Moto video had issues, Liliana Natsir video had issues, all because of the Olympic stuff involved. So obviously if it was on a Patreon, I wouldn't need to worry myself too much about that. I would keep the Patreon incredibly cheap. I'm not quite sure what yet, but it would probably be like £1 a month. And that would just, if I can get enough people, that obviously would just allow me to make those videos without fear. I'd still put them on YouTube, don't worry. I would still try to work around those issues, but it would just take a little bit of the burden off myself. And obviously, again, I would also be looking at other benefits for people that would become Patreon members. I'm not quite sure yet, but I would obviously add a few things on. I would do as much as I can, but I would obviously keep it cheap because I am aware that the majority of my viewers on YouTube, based on my analytics, are from Asia, where you can't really... for the majority of people that probably do watch my content, you can't really part ways with like even like £5-10 a month. So whereas £1 I think is quite reasonable, and hopefully it'll obviously kind of what's the word? Give you incentive to join. It would obviously really help me. But again, more details on that in the next few weeks. It probably won't be until next month because, like I said, the next few weeks for me are incredibly busy. I've got a lot of things going on, and so I need to kind of put my attention more to that. But once that's out of the way, then I can focus back onto this channel a little bit more with those 2 videos behind the badminton ones, the re-release of the 97 final, the video of the 2017 one, and obviously then I'll also be looking at creating a Patreon. So I guess the last question would be, if I did create a Patreon and it was, say, let's just say it's going to be £1 per month, would you be interested? Is that something that you do? Would you support the channel or not? It doesn't matter. You don't have to say. You don't have to like feel obligated to say yes, or you can say no. It's fine. Watching these videos, also helps me. And liking and sharing and subscribing, all those things help. Things that cost nothing, absolutely fine. But just so I can gauge a little bit what kind of interest there would be. So yeah. Anyway, I think that's enough of an outro. Again, thanks for watching. Again, if you want to purchase any of these Beckman's Breakdown merchandise, then the link is in the description. I will see you this time next week when I'm talking about the China Masters. I've already watched some of the matches this morning, and I'll continue to watch them throughout the day and obviously throughout the week. Plenty of stars are returning this week. There's obviously going to be plenty to talk about, so I'm excited for that. So until then, also, last thing, let me know what you think about the process in terms of this video, with the Q&A coming first, or the Q&A being the main frame, the main structure for this video. I think it actually, not just because I spoke for less time, but I think it gave me a little bit more focus into my answers. I did still ramble on, that's just me, you know that, but it did actually allow me to focus a little bit more on certain topics. So I'd like to know your thoughts, whether you like the structure being centered around your questions or not. So yeah, plenty of things I've asked you throughout this episode. So please do get in the comment section. Yeah, no, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one.